What's going on, guys? This is Steve with the MMA Minute, and today we'll be breaking down UFC 274, the main card, giving you guys my predictions and some of the best bets that we're seeing, some of the early lines out there to get some good action on. So without further ado, we'll get right into it. The first fight of the night, we're getting Donald Cowboy Cerrone taking on Joe Lauzon. Cerrone, the minus 190 favorite, Lauzon, the plus 160 underdog. Not a great play, not a great start to the pay-per-view, especially from a betting standpoint. I don't love this line. So on the one side, you have Donald Cowboy Cerrone, the more active fighter. He is 0-5-1 in his last 6. Most recently, he was finished by Alex Morano. That did not look good. He looked his age, was not moving well. The defense was poor, did not deal with the power, turtled up, got finished. But the fight before that against Nico Price, we saw a much different version of Cowboy where he still had something left to give. That fight gets scored as a draw. The output was there. The chin held up. The striking looked very good. We saw some of the takedowns, some of the grappling. So if that version of Cowboy shows up, the minus 190 price, it makes more sense for sure because Joe Lauzon has not fought since 2019. And granted, he did pick up the W. He finished, I think it was Jonathan Pierce. He finished him in round 1, TKO. Looked good. The striking was on point. He hurt Pierce early on, eventually took him to the ground, got a great position there, finished the fight. But before that, he was kind of on his way out of the UFC. He was just 1-4 in his last 5. He gets hit a lot. I think he relies on the grappling pretty heavily, which is something that Cowboy should be able to defend pretty well. So I don't really see a great path to victory here for Joe Lauzon if it is forced to stand up and trade between the two guys. I like Donald to win that fight. I'm going to lean Donald at the minus 190 price just to make an official prediction. Probably Cerrone by TKO at some point, either in round 2 or 3. So that would be my play. I also don't hate the under 2.5 rounds coming in at minus 145. Both guys very capable of a finish. Again, they're a little older. Maybe the chin's not going to hold up. So that play at minus 145 is a good way to get it. And you got to get action on both guys. So that's how I'm playing that. Leaning Cerrone. I like the under in 2.5. And we will move on to the next fight here where we're seeing a very similar situation, right? So we have Mauricio Shogun Rua taking on OSP. OSP coming into this fight as a minus 260 favorite over Shogun, who is plus 210. These odds seem to be out of whack, but it's a very similar situation where you have OSP, who's the more active fighter. Shogun hasn't fought in nearly 2 years. It was back in 2020 where he got finished by Paul Craig. So he was kind of already on his way out of the UFC, comes back into a fight against OSP, who has dropped the last 2. So he got finished by Jamal Hill. He got finished by Tanner Boser. And before that, he actually got the knockout win over Alonzo Menafield. So it's just, this is a mixed bag. This is a complete toss-up to me. I'm not confident betting OSP as the minus 260 favorite here. If you are going to put some action on there, again, I'm looking towards the over 1.5 rounds here. I think that play as a prop at minus 150 is actually a decent play. Both guys, you could say, are finishers still at this point. They have both been finished a lot in their careers, but they typically go over the 1.5 mark. Mauricio Shogun Rua has done that in the last, the last 8 of his fights have gone over 1.5 rounds. With OSP, the last 7 have gone over 1.5 rounds. So I think that is a solid play here because I'm not touching the money line. And I have to make an official prediction. I do think OSP wins this fight. I would probably go by a late round 3 TKO finish over Shogun. But it's, again, this is completely dicey. The first 2 fights here are very tricky. We get a much more favorable matchup to predict in the next matchup, which is Michael Chandler taking on Tony Ferguson. And Michael Chandler's coming in as a big-time favorite here. He's minus 410. Tony Ferguson can be had at plus 320 as the underdog. And this is kind of the story for me. This is how I see it. Michael Chandler came into the UFC, had great success, early on, KOs Dan Hooker, nearly beats Charles Oliveira to take the 155 belt, has a tremendous back-and-forth matchup with Justin Gaethje, and he has certainly earned a spot. He has earned a lot of respect. I think he is definitely a top 5 guy in this division. But at this stage in his career, I see him probably being more of a showman than anything. I think he went out there with Justin Gaethje, just looking to brawl, put on a show for the fans, and kind of earn some more, credit and respect from everyone. So I see him doing the same thing here against Tony Ferguson, just going in there, giving the fans what they want to see on a pay-per-view, big spotlight, and this is just going to be an absolute brawl. And I think that actually plays into the favor of Tony Ferguson, who basically thrives in the chaos better than anyone. And granted, we haven't seen it from Tony the last 3 fights. Beneil Dariush just controls him with the grappling. Charles Oliveira controls him with the grappling. And Justin Gaethje just goes 5 rounds and, lands over, it must have been 150 strikes. And, that gets stopped in round 5. So Tony, for what, 11 rounds, 11 straight rounds now, we haven't really seen much of Tony. Granted, he did land a good amount of shots against Justin Gaethje. He caught him with an uppercut, dropped him to the ground. And that's kind of something that I could see here where Michael Chandler is just going in there, fighting reckless and careless, and ends up getting caught by Tony, who, if he hurts him, maybe he jumps on him, snatches a neck. So I actually think, just because I think Michael Chandler is going to go in there having a game plan that's just cause chaos, I think that's going to play into Tony's hands here. And I'm going to take a wild shot here. I actually like Tony Ferguson as the underdog, as the plus 320 underdog. Give me the 3-1 on my money. I have no problem taking that. I'm not putting, I'm not laying the minus 410 here for Chandler. I don't think it's a great parlay piece. If anything, I want to see Tony get a win. I'm going to be willing to bet on that. So give me Tony money line plus 320. I also think someone gets finished in this fight. So the under 2.5 at minus 155 makes a lot of sense to me. There is definitely a scenario where Chandler goes in there and finishes Tony Ferguson. I could absolutely see that happening. Chandler throws bombs, has a ton of power. That could definitely happen. And I think Tony, same thing. We could see a TKO finish. We could see a submission finish. So those are my plays. I like Tony as the underdog, and I am taking that under 2.5 rounds. Moving on to the first championship fight of the night, and this is a great matchup. So we're getting the rematch here. Rose Namajunas taking on Carla Esparza. Rose can be had at minus 200 as the favorite, Carla Esparza as the plus 170 underdog. These two originally fought a long time ago now. Carla Esparza got the submission finish. I believe it was in round 3. But since then, 2 different paths here. We've seen Rose Namajunas really take a giant leap forward. She is currently your champ, and she has looked great. She's very patient. She has really matured since that day. The only issue that I have is that while she did mature, the striking looks good. She's much more patient. She still has the power. Her wrestling has improved, but hasn't really improved all that much from a defense standpoint. That's where I'm a little bit worried here, because we just saw with Zhang Wei Li, she went into her most recent fight with Rose and was successful on 5 of 11 takedowns. And that worries me. That worries me a lot, because we know exactly what Carla Esparza is going to be looking to do. This is not going to be a stand-up war. That's not where Carla wants to be. That in all of her recent fights, pretty much in all of her fights in the UFC, she is just looking to wrestle, to take you down. She can rack up the control time. Absolutely no problems there. The ground and pound's pretty decent. We just saw against Yan Shonan, she was able to finish her with the ground and pound, which was very vicious. She has wins: Marina Rodriguez, Michelle Watterson, Alexa Grasso, Verna Handaroba. In those 5 fights alone, she has 17 takedowns. She's generally racking up 5+ minutes of control. So we're seeing 2 very similar fighters that we saw when these 2 first faced each other back in the day. Carla, the wrestler; Rose, more of the striker, who is more of the well-rounded fighter for sure. But I think she still kind of has that flaw. I don't think Rose has necessarily fixed the takedown defense, and that's something that Carla can definitely exploit. Is it enough, though? Is it enough for me to bet the 170 underdog money on Carla Esparza? I probably say no, and I say no because Rose does have that championship experience. She does have that 5-round experience. Carla has never actually gone 5 rounds. And Rose is a much more patient striker, which I think the first time around. We saw Rose kind of loading up on some of her shots. That's where Carla was able to get her takedowns. And don't get me wrong, I think Carla is going to score takedowns in this fight. I think she will be successful. We'll definitely see over 10 attempts on her end. But I think as this goes on, I do think it still favors Rose going into the championship rounds, into rounds 4, into rounds 5. I think Rose is going to take this to decision. I think it's going to be very, very close here. I don't hate Carla Esparza as an underdog if that's a play that you want to do. I think the blueprint is there. I think if someone's going to beat Rose, it's not going to be a striker. It's going to be someone who is wrestling heavy. So if you want to take the underdog there, I don't blame you at all. I am going to take Rose Namajunas in this rematch. I think she wins a close, unanimous decision. And if I'm looking at a couple of plays here, am I confident in the minus 200 line? I am not, because I really do think there is a world where Esparza can steal 3 rounds and win this fight. Absolutely. But I think it's going to be razor close. I do think it's going to decision. So that's another bet that you can look at here. You can find the over 4.5 rounds at minus 205. That's a little bit juiced. I don't love it, but if you want to maybe go prop hunting a little bit, you can look at the Rose to win by decision. You can look at the Carla to win by decision. I don't think we see the finish here, but I am going to lean Rose in this spot. Again, don't love the minus 200. I won't be laying the minus 200. I will be leaning towards Rose in this one. But if you want to do a little bit of prop bets, if you do want to get betting on this fight, then I think you're looking at either fighter to win by decision. And I don't hate the over 4.5, but at minus 205, again, it's a little bit more pricey than I want it to be at. All right, guys, in the main event of the night, the second title fight here, we have Charles Oliveira taking on Justin Gaethje. Oliveira defending his belt here. He is the minus 165 favorite. Justin Gaethje, the plus 140 underdog. This is just a phenomenal matchup. One of the best main events of the year for sure, probably of all of 2022, if we're being honest. And where do we start? So Charles Oliveira, we've seen his rise. He's been counted out many a times, kind of flew under the radar for a while, got the big win over Tony Ferguson, where he just out-grappled him for 3 rounds, completely destroyed him. Then he gets paired up with Michael Chandler after that. And you guys know the story there. Chandler nearly finishing the fight a couple times there, but it was Oliveira who bounced back, stayed true to his game plan, just kept coming forward, eventually gets the finish himself, wins the 155 belt, defends against Dustin Poirier, and another back and forth fight where Oliveira was getting caught early on, overcomes some big obstacles there, gets the finish by submission, which was insane. And that's just what makes him so dangerous. Charles Oliveira just has so many different weapons to use. I think his striking is very underrated. He has a wide arsenal of attacks that he uses, kind of similar to a Marlon Chito Vera, where you're going to see the front kicks, the elbows, the use of the knees. Everything has power behind it with the intent to end the fight. And then, of course, I think he is the UFC's leader in submission victories. So Oliveira can get it done standing. He can get it done on the ground. He is one of the most dangerous fighters on the UFC roster. So a lot of great things to obviously love about him. Justin Gaethje, on the other hand, another, true finisher, more of a stand-up boxer type. Throughout the last few years, we've seen a much more patient approach from Justin Gaethje. He's calculated, good timing that allows him to set up good, clean shots where he doesn't need to force the power because he's hitting you so cleanly that the power is going to be there. He now has the 5-round experience. His cardio seems to hold up. He throws a high level of output. This guy, if you leave him around, he's going to be a problem over 5 rounds. So there is obviously a ton of good things to love about Justin Gaethje here. And I think, one of the things we're going to look at here is that Charles Oliveira in a lot of his fights gets into danger. He gets hurt. He gets hit. And who hits harder than Justin Gaethje? Probably no one. So there is definitely underdog potential here at plus 140 for Justin Gaethje to win this fight. But one thing that really stood out to me was right now the over in rounds is set at 1.5. I love this line, over 1.5 at minus 165. The price is a little bit high, but I think this is a great bet to get on the main event here. I think we're going to get a feel out round in round one. And as I'm saying, Justin Gaethje being the more patient guy recently, I think he's not going to rush into anything. I think he's going to definitely drag this at least into round 3 or 4 before we see a finish. So I love that play over 1.5 rounds. If I'm making my official prediction here, I am going to go with the champ. I was very close to picking Justin Gaethje as the underdog, but I am going to go with Oliveira, the champ. I just cannot count him out again. I've done it before. I've learned my lesson. This guy just has more ways to win the fight. It's as simple as that for me. It's a close pick for sure, but I do like Oliveira. I don't even hate the -165 price point. If you want to play that as a money line, if you're on Oliveira, that's a great bet. I would also be looking later in the week when the props come out, a double chance bet on Charles Oliveira to win by TKO or submission. And then even for Justin Gaethje, I think you can get him to win by TKO or decision on a double chance bet. I think those are two great main event plays here. And it's going to be an amazing card on the main card here with the last 3 fights for sure. And especially this main event. I'm very much looking forward to it. But there you guys have it. Thanks for tuning in. That's the UFC 274 breakdown. Those are the predictions, some of the plays I'll be having. I'll hopefully be putting out a full list of bets throughout the card, the early prelims, the main card later on in the week as I do more research. But definitely needed to get something out there just to start off the week. So those are my plays. Make sure to check me out. I am at the MMA Minute, and we will see you guys next time.